Well, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Buenos dias, buenos noches, bienvenidos, friends. I am so happy to be joining you today for our Cultivating Voices live poetry's weekly reading. And today, it is our new books showcase. Joining us today, we have three incredible poets that I've been looking forward. I look forward to hearing them read when I can individually, but this particular constellation, what a gathering together. So today we will be hearing from the work of Heide Seaborn, Raine Geoghegan, and Gary Copeland Lilley. I'm your host for today, Sandy Yannone, joining you from Olympia, Washington. And I want to send a hearty welcome to everyone here joining us live in the Zoom room. Got a beautiful audience that kind of keeps streaming in, and to those of you watching us live on Zoom. Well, Cultivating Voices live poetry, as many, if not all of you know, started in March 2020 in response to the global pandemic. And as venues were shutting down, we found a way to provide an opportunity for poets to gather and continue to read and promote their beautiful work. And it has been quite a journey over these past 2 years, where we've hosted hundreds of poets now and have heard thousands of poems at this point. And every single week is its own special revelation of poetry. And we're so grateful today, as I've said, to be able to feature the work of Heide Seaborn, Raine Geoghegan, and Gary Copeland Lilley, who will be reading in that order. I want to remind everybody that the chat is live for you to send your encouragement and support for the poets. It's the way to be. It's the way to be the audience member, and as well as we will be adding links to the books. And if you have the resources and the inclination and the desire, we certainly hope you will support the poets and their presses by offering your support and purchasing 1, 2, 3, or many books today in support of poetry and the poets that we're featuring here at Cultivating Voices live poetry. Well, let me not linger any further and move us along for our fabulous showcase today. Get this party started, as we say. And reading today first is a poet that I'm very fortunate to call one of my friends, and also I not only adore her work, but I really love this particular collection that we're going to get to hear from. And coming up on about the first anniversary, of the publication, so it's exciting to have Heide Seaborn join us. The other thing that I will mention is, and this is in her formal bio as well, but you also know Heide as a consummate editor of the Adroit Journal. And, you know, it's always a pleasure to welcome folks who are citizens of supporting poets in their own right, and really Heide is kind of right at the top of my list in all that you do for poetry and poets, particularly here in the United States. And it's just a joy to be able to hear you read from your latest collection, as well as the good fortune that I've had to hear you read from this collection a number of times, because it's some of my favorite poems to hear. I loved your launch, and every single time I've been able to hear you read these poems about the very iconic Marilyn Monroe. Well, let me give you the formal bio of Heide Seaborn. Heide Seaborn is the author of Marilyn Essays and Poems from Pank with Poetry Prize winner, and Insomniac's Slumber Party with Marilyn Monroe, and her acclaimed debut, Give a Girl Chaos, as well as the Comstock Chapbook Award-winning Bite Marks. Heide has work currently, recently, fabulously in Blackbird, Beloit, Brevity, Copper Nickel, Cortland Review, Diode, the Financial Times of London, the Offing, Pen Review, Radar, the Slowdown, and elsewhere. And as I mentioned, Heide is indeed the executive editor of one of my favorite journals probably in the world, the Adroit Journal. I love it. And holds an MFA from New York University. Welcome, Heide.
Oh my gosh, thank you, Sandy. I'm so thrilled to be here. What a wonderful community you have built. It's extraordinary. And so hats off to you, even though your hat is on. And thank you, Kim, for organizing. And I can't wait to hear the work of Raine and Gary. Okay, I'm going to start off. Yeah, so a little bit over a year ago, this book came out, which is The Insomniac Slumber Party for Marilyn Monroe, with Marilyn Monroe. And then Pank decided to do another version of it, which just came out last week. It's called Marilyn Essays and Poems. And what they did is they took all these essays that I'd written and a couple other things that they asked me to write, and a new cover and new artwork inside. It's pretty cool. And the full collection. So it's called a collector's edition of the Insomniac Slumber Party for Marilyn Monroe. And again, it came out on the 2nd, which was last Tuesday, and last Thursday was the 60th anniversary of Marilyn's death, which is kind of amazing that she is still so much a part of sort of the celebrity world. So I'm going to start by reading part of one of the essays, and then I'll skip into some of the poetry. Thank you. And this is an essay. It's a lyric essay called The Illusion of Sleep, and it was published in The Hunger. You can sleep when you're dead. I heard these words in Silicon Valley when I was in my 20s. The phrase comes from Benjamin Franklin. Well, it's a paraphrase of Franklin's, "There will be sleeping enough in the grave." I'm a lifelong follower of the Franklin sleep principle. There are 24 hours in the day. Why waste a third of them sleeping? In high school, I listened to talk radio late at night, to Ira Blue on KGO in San Francisco. The radio signal traveled 1,000 miles north to Seattle to reach me in the bedroom I'd painted with a wall-to-wall rainbow. Ira Blue signed off every night by playing Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue. The cue to finally fall asleep. My breath slowed even as the piano thundered. When Ira Blue died just before my 16th birthday, my insomnia really kicked in. My mind crochets a blanket of worries at night. One of my sisters knits. She never gets further than a small square the size of a washcloth. She says it's a distraction requiring no thought at all. She gives away her knit washcloths. They are too precious to use. Madonna apparently never sleeps. I read that on the Tuft & Needle website when I shopped for a new mattress. I ended up buying one of their mattresses for my guest room. My guests rave about how well they sleep. Once at a late night party in the Hollywood Hills, Madonna's bare, pregnant belly glowed like a peach. Her breasts heaved from her bra. She took my hand, laid it on the firm swell of her hard belly to feel her daughter's kick. I lost a year of sleep with each of my babies. My postpartum sleep, a patchwork of night naps. I realize it has been years since I have lingered over a sleeping child, the fermented air of morning, sweaty, pillow-creased faces. Now I have a sleeping dog, curled next to my desk, or splayed on his back, paws clawing the air as he runs in a dream. Where is he going? I've never known such sleep. For decades, I've existed on an average of 5.5 hours of sleep. The same as Ben Franklin. Like Ben, I have found sleep superfluous. And even as I praise those that sleep in or nap, I secretly pity them. When I started out in Silicon Valley, sleep was considered a time suck. Maybe I was drawn to Silicon Valley because of that, a whole place where filled with people who functioned on minimal sleep. And really think of the accomplishment, the invention of the microchip, personal computer, genetic engineering, the internet, the iPhone. Steve Jobs slept 6 hours, same for Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey. And collectively, those have invented online payments, social media, electric automobiles, and yes, chaos, but still. Of course, sometimes I just lay awake, wasting those hours. Well, maybe not a total loss. I try to think through a problem or a conversation or action. Maybe it was a noise, a car alarm ignited, or the rattle of a truck, or my body heated as if a teapot set to boil. I wake in a twist of bed sheets. But what now? Do I flip like a pancake on a hot griddle or lie there, mind whipping, or do I rise and work, doom scroll, read, what? Fran Lebowitz has a personal library of over 10,000 books. When she's not reading, she walks the street of New York with a sense of ownership. Lebowitz says her mother made her go to bed every night at 7:30. She blames that for her chronic insomnia. My parents put us to bed at 7:30. We'd have a children's dinner, bathe, and my mother would read to us, then lights out. My parents ate supper later. I'd fall asleep listening to the hum of their intimacies. I often think how my children had parents that loved them, but never loved one another. I'll stop there and jump into some poems. So the poetry, thank you. The poetry part of this is the Insomniac Slumber Party with Marilyn Monroe. And the conceit of it is really, it's kind of a middle of the night conversation. It's a slumber party between the speaker, who's some version of the poet, who's probably some version of me, with Marilyn Monroe, who's some version of Norma Jean Baker. So, this is the world we live in, where we're all performing in some way. And I'm performing right now. I'm going to start with, there's a poem that I wrote called An Insomniac's Diary, or Insomnia Diaries. And then what I did is I took that and I scattered it throughout the collection. So you're reading along, and then there's these time-stamped moments. So I'm going to start with that, one of those. 1:26 a.m. I'm patrolling tonight's borders for a scrap of sleep to roll and smoke. I crave Ambien and the limey vodka tonic. It's the middle of the night and Marilyn's here without a lick of makeup in my kitchen. wrapped in a cream silk robe like mine. So many men and marriages between the two of us, it's hard to keep track. I offer her tea. She opts for that vodka, says, skip the Ambien, darling. We have things to discuss. So the next poem, the next sort of series of poems are sort of one and the other, the two voices talking. And this is Marilyn, and she's discussing her marriage to Joe DiMaggio. It's called After the Honeymoon. Darling, if your second marriage is anything like mine, you will be invited to his mother's home to crush the garlic, swirl the sauce to a simmer, whisk eggs, cream, babies. You will hush your cry, reduce your glamour to a glimmer. Slip your high heels under his bed, walk barefoot into his story, its glory fading in the flash of lights, cameras, red carpet under your manicured toes. I dare you to hold that pose, his arm shielding against your fame rising. Do you remember wanting a man to love you into oblivion? When you lift the skirt of your dreams, will he applaud? Second marriage. I studied his name on the university building I'd studied in, studied the dark writing when his mother issued eggshell invitations. Somebody, oh, there's a little echo. Okay, thanks. I'll start over.
Thank
Second
you.
marriage. I studied his name on the university building I'd studied in, studied the dark writing when his mother issued eggshell invitations, stiff and engraved. I obeyed, said yes to the litany of cocktails and Sunday dinners, kept quiet, kept quietly working, kept quietly building a name. He wanted me kept. His work pressing a thumb on mine, his thumb pressing on my eggshell throat. How angry my flesh. How my angry flesh worried the marriage thin, how I worried the thin nights, worried myself so very thin. A litany of worries forming in my throat, pressing into prayers, engraved on my eggshell flesh. I kept quiet until another man issued a darker invitation. I said yes. This next poem is called The Affair, and it's about the beginning of her relationship with Arthur Miller. A party, stepping out into the jasmine night, she'd read his latest play. He'd seen her movies. When his letters arrived like weather, she wore a coat in summertime. Seasons leafed along like that. He appeared one evening, wearing the tie his wife had knotted. They had dinner, windows closed around them, their candlelit bodies shuddered. When morning sunk her teeth, they drank each other again, the day severed from all others. They collected these days into a home with no keys. She bathed in his voice, words slipping down the drain into his palms. They washed themselves, their history, bed sheets billowing. They forgot how a clothesline tells a story to strangers, the neighbors, his wife, passing by on a Sunday drive. They gathered up their cotton days and walked out into the afternoon sun together, blinking. So this next poem I've actually never read out loud, and it's a funny one. It's an acrostic. I'm going to just show you what it looks like on a page. You have to turn the page sideways in the book. And I had so much fun writing it, and I hope I have fun reading it, because it was created out of some party menu notes that in Marilyn's handwriting that I discovered in a book called Fragments that had grocery lists and poems and letters and all sorts of sort of flotsam and jetsam from Marilyn's life, and that had been found in a box, and they were put into a book called Fragments. It's a wonderful book, and it was a great resource for this project. But she was putting together a party, a dinner party at the apartment that she shared with Arthur Miller. And everyone that was coming was part of kind of their literary crowd, but also at the time, all these people were under investigation. It was the McCarthy era. Arthur Miller had been hauled in front of the HUAC. A lot of these people had as well. So it was interesting to them for me to go and research and figure out who all these people that attended the party were and their relationship and what was going on at that very moment. So there's a ton of little references in here, as well as her grocery list and all sorts of stuff. How to throw a communist party from Marilyn's party menu notes. Champagne, at least some kind of wine with dinner. Buy liquor, scotch, gin, vermouth, hors d'oeuvres, caviar. Others. Is that Copeland on the turntable? Marilyn, are you cooking up a communist plot? Want a martini, Comrade George? And what can I get you, dear Comrade Marcia? Here, have some nibbles, maybe an olive or two. Care for a refresh, napkin, celery hearts, scallions, radishes. Are the crudités unsalted? Izzy, you look so devilish. Your hair slicked back like Stalin and knocking back a Manhattan. Never mind. Have you seen the Forbidden Planet? Red flick, all right, and red monsters. 2 roasts, red meat. I dare say prime ribs of beef. Anyone heard about Chaplin? Turkey. The Times called bridge a turkey. Silly that. Hedda, darling, will you make the dressing? Large mixed green salad with endive hearts, avocado. The Hollywood 10 gang, also aspect. In Mexico. Marilyn, this is divine. Vegetables, frozen peas or in a pod. A drink to Art and Marilyn, 2 perfect peas in a pod. Or potatoes. And I hear Orson's having an affair. Hey, Dreamboat, more red wine? It's French. Fruit and ice cream for dessert, chalk and vanilla. Norman, recite a poem, pretty please. Have some coffee and cookies and Danish pastry. Jessie, you're awfully quiet. I'll take a white Russian and later birthday cake for Helene. Let's sing happy birthday and make a great big wish. You didn't. Leave the dishes and roll up the rugs. I've got Robson's new record. Come on, let's dance. So, okay. So they did get married, as you know, and but it was interesting because literally Marilyn heard that she was getting married to Arthur watching the televised coverage of him in front of the HUAC. And so that's a little background for this poem, which is called There Was No Honeymoon. You ever think of getting married again? And there it is, just like the dog's vomit that everyone steps around. Oh, I loved Art all right, willing him free from McCarthy's clutches. I said, I do. Said yes to be a stamp on his passport. So if your third marriage is anything like mine, you will call him Daddy. And discover he has written your dialogue in the margin. Everything's been scripted, but don't I love being told what to do? There is a fork for every course, and I knew at night to let him spoon the sweet cantaloupes of my rump. I knew to disappear into his white curtained Connecticut, appear for cocktails with his curious friends. Isn't she a wonder? I knew to quit work, to make babies, and when he drew a blank page from his typewriter, I knew to bury my unborn and go back to work. So that's what happened. Unfortunately, they had a series of miscarriages together, and he had white writer's block And I'm just going to jump to one final poem. And this is at the end of their marriage, and it's called Postcard from Reno. They were filming The Misfits, which of course Arthur Miller had written and she starred in. It's, if you have a chance to watch it, it's actually kind of an amazing film, you know, with Gary Cooper and Clark Gable, last film that Clark Gable did before he died. Okay, Postcard from Reno. Dear Art, there is no beauty in this land, dirt and sky, nothing in between, just a thin line, a demarcation of heaven from earth. You once called me nightly from here, forced by divorce into this desert, our love a red-tailed hawk. And now here I am, playing at love, shacked up in an empty landscape with the shadow of you. Shadows lengthen with the day, and at night the stars bury one another. When we wrap, it's over, it's over, it's over. Thank you. And I'm over and out and on to the rest of the show. And I look so forward to hearing from Raine and from Gary. Thank you so much.
Brava, brava.
And what a show, and what a show, and what a show it's been already. You've been listening today to our new book showcase, capping us off from the star marquee, Heide Seaborn, with the latest collection, Maryland Poems and Essays from Pank, which is the follow-up. And as you said, it's a collector's edition. I love that, the collector's edition. From An Insomniac Slumber Party with Marilyn Monroe, which came out last year, also with Pank. Incredible to be able to, as you mentioned, hear these poems after the 60th anniversary. Incredible. And also, I want to remind folks what happens when we dive into deep research, because this was a labor of much, much love and labor to mine the details. I mean, down to that grocery list. You know, I love how you called it the flotsam and jetsam of Marilyn's life, and to be able to create poetry of such just prismatic elegance and fervor. It takes that kind of dedication to the research to get to those details that you can then stitch together. Well, folks, thank you, Heidi, and never a disappointment to hear those poems. And oh my gosh, I'd listen all day. I'd like to hear you read the whole book from start to finish one day. Thank you again. Well, we jaunt over from the Pacific Northwest over across the pond, as I like to say, and what a day of a reading it is today, when we get to bring together poets from one coast and right from the coast of a different country. And I'm so thrilled, as you all know, being a salmon poet myself, to be able to welcome one of my siblings, as I like to call them. And it's especially beautiful today because this is Raine's debut collection that we're going to be hearing from. Just launched, I know, right? Put the hands up there. Just launched in June. in Ennistymen, Homo Salmon poetry, and just a thrill to be able to celebrate the publication of the Talking Stick with you here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. As I've mentioned in the pre-show, you know, Raine's been a member of ours and posting on the site for months and months. And so I love it when the day arrives when we get to celebrate the publication, particularly the debut collection of one of our members. And today is the reign of Raine. Yes. So the poetry reign of Raine. So let me share a little bit with you from the formal biography. Raine Geoghegan is a poet, prose writer who has an MA in creative writing from the University of Chichester. Born in the Welsh Valleys, she is of Romani, Welsh, and Irish ethnicity. She's been nominated for the Forward Prize, Pushcart Prize, and the Best of the Net 2018. And her poems and prose have been published online and in print with Under the Radar Poetry, Ireland Review, The Clearing, Traveler's Times, and many, many more. In addition to the debut collection, she does have 3 poetry chapbooks with Hedgehog Press. And we are so fortunate today to be able to be hearing from poems from her debut collection, published with Salmon Poetry in June 2020, The Talking Stick, O Puckering Kosh. Would you please welcome Raine Geoghegan.
Thank you so much, Sandy. You're quite an amazing woman, I must say, all that you do. And I love your verve and your appreciation of all things poetry. Thank you so much for having me on. Thank you, Kim, and thank you to all those behind the scenes. And thank you also to everyone that's here today. It's a great pleasure to be sharing poems and monologues from my latest collection with Salmon. It's called The Talking Stick, O Puckering Kosh. And you will notice that as I read my poetry, there are a lot of gypsy words. The Romany jib, the Romany language is something I feel very passionate about. I try and include it in my work as much as I can, because as you know, like indigenous languages, they are, you know, really sort of on the way out. We have to grasp these languages and keep them alive as long as we possibly can. And I do believe that the Romani language is a very beautiful language. It comes from India, Sanskrit, Hindi, and Gujarati, and it's traveled all over the world, settling with various gypsy folk. And I'm very, very pleased to be reading my first poem to you, which is called To Be a Romani. Let me tell you what it was like to be a Romani in the old days. We lived in Vardos, made love and fought in them. We picked ox, fruit and veg until our backs were sore. We made pegs and sold them along the drom. Then there were the gillies we sang until our voices were hoarse. The boards we laid down in the beer shop so we could step dance. The herbs we picked to mend our body and spirit. The drabas passed down. Tea leaves left in a cup to read. Cards spread on the table awaiting the dukara. Chavis brought up to rocker the Romani. We helped each other out no matter what. We cooked on the yog, rabbit stew, hotchy witchy and Joey Gray. When one of ours died, we'd sit up all night. We'd drink mesky or whiskey, sing some of the old songs. The next day, the Vardas and covels were burnt. There was totting, ragging, selling the luladi. We worshipped the ground that we walked on, the fresh air, green spaces, the lungo drum, meeting up with friends, getting the gry ready for traveling and finding the next Achin Tan. All this and more. I'll tell you what it was like to be a Romany in the old days. It was bloody cushy. Thank you so much. My next poem is in honor of my grandmother, Amy Lane. She was a true Romany on both sides of her family, a traveling woman, and she used to live in a proper Vardo. And when she had to give up that Vardo and move into a house called a Ken, she decided she would go out walking, pushing her pram filled with flowers. And that's what she did until she was about 88. And this is called A Memory of the Hop Fields. She is in the front garden, bending low, picking bluebells, wearing her old red apron with the Spanish dancer on the front. She stands up, rubbing her lower back, her mind shaping a memory. The hop fields, her mother leans strong, picking the hops as quick as a squirrel, her bal in plaits tied on top of her head, her gold hoops pulling her ears down, ruddy cheeks, dry cracked lips. Her father pulling poles, sweating, smiling, his gold tooth for all to see. At the end of a long day, she would stand on top of an apple crate, comb his hair, kiss his neck, tasting of salt. He would pick her up, swing her high, low, and say, "You're the prettiest little chai there ever was." Thank you. So the next poem, it's a short one. You probably know this already, that gypsies used to eat hedgehogs. Now, nobody really eats hedgehogs anymore, but if you go back in time to when gypsies were traveling around the country, they would be eating rabbits and pheasants, and hedgehogs did provide a nutritious supper. So I'm going to recite this, and I just will say that I have never eaten a hedgehog, and I do absolutely adore hedgehogs. There are 3 words for hedgehog: hotchy witchy, hotchy, and jog jog. So I've tried to include those in the poem. Okay, it's called hotchy witchy. To bake an hotchy witchy, roll it in the clay, drop it in the embers of the yog. Go and sing a song, chase a shushy down the drum, do a little jig, jog, jog. When the clay is open, the spines will come away. What's left is sweet and tasty. Chank it while it's hot. It may be all you got. Gorge your food, it's not. Chew your little jig, jog, jog. Chew your little jig, jog, jog. Thank you. Thank you. So moving on, page 68, this is a little vignette. What did you say? 68, yeah, 68. It's a little vignette, and again, it's based on my granny and grandfather, Amy and Alfie, and my mum, who used to have a strawberry mark. It's my mum loved picking strawberries, and I really wanted to sort of do something around that. So it's called The Strawberry Girl. On warm summer nights, they lay on thick blankets, looking up at the stars. The door of the Varda left slightly open in case the chavies woke. They would whisper about the time they first met in the strawberry fields. He remembered the blue dress she used to wear, how her hair was braided on top of her head, her sovereign earrings, unlike any he'd ever seen. She would tell him how she was taken by his honest brown eyes and the way he took her hand and said, "Shall we go for a stroll, Amy?" He had picked a strawberry for her, and it was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. It was cushty bot that both he and their girl had strawberry marks on their backs. They laughed at how she could never get enough of the fruit. They called her the Strawberry Girl, their filly with the corn-coloured hair. He yawns loudly. "Shh, go to sleep, Alf." They both settle down, his hand resting on her hip, her hand on his chest. Thank you. Thank you. The Greenhouse, 57. So this next poem, thank you so much. My grandfather, when he had to move out of the wagon and they lived in a brand new council house in Middlesex in the UK, he decided he would make little gypsy wagons. He missed the life that he used to lead, and it was something to keep him occupied, that and gardening and keeping his animals and pets. So he used to sit on the doorstep. And this poem was the poem that was published in Poetry Island Review, and I got to read it in Dublin. And I actually met Evan Boland, which was, yes, it was absolutely fantastic. And she really loved this poem, and I sat and chatted with her, and it's just, you know, every time I read this poem, I think of her. So I'm going to read it to you, and yes, it's rather a sad poem, but it's also a rich poem as well. In memory of my grandfather, Alfie Lane. The Greenhouse. Mourners spill out into the alleyway. Amidst the black are flashes of purple and red of women's scarves and men's ties. My uncle, a staff sergeant in the army and just back from Germany, is dressed in his uniform. He leans against the kitchen wall, having a smoke. We drink tea laced with whiskey. My aunts dry their tears on freshly pressed white handkerchiefs. I go into the sitting room and see my sister sitting on a stool, her hands clasped tightly on her lap. The coffin is open. Grandfather is in his best suit. His pocket watch hangs from his top pocket. A family photograph is tucked into his waistcoat close to his heart. His old hip flask lies at his side. No doubt there will be a little whiskey in there. He still wears his gold ring. He looks as if he's resting, as if he'll sit up at any moment. I place my hand gently on his. Grandfather and I are walking down the path to the greenhouse. I am 6 years old. It's a hot day. I'm wearing my shorts. Weeds and wildflowers tickle my ankles. He pushes the door open, ushers me in, points upwards. What do you think of the grapes, my gal? Tilting my head back, I see huge bunches, deep red, ready to be plucked. He reaches up, pulls a few down, rinses them in a bowl of water, then places them in my hand. I bite one and the juice runs down my chin. I eat 2 more. They're lovely, grandfather. He smiles, opens a can of beer, takes a mouthful and says, do you see these grapes? Do you know why they're so tasty? I shake my head. Well, it's because the mullah watches over him, he says. He laughs, I laugh, but I'm not sure who the mullah is. I finish my cup of tea and tell Granny that I'm going down to the greenhouse. The door is slightly ajar, the white paint faded, flaking. I push the door hard, go in and smell sawdust, stale beer and decay. There is an open can of pale ale on the shelf alongside 3 broken brown pots, an old knife with a blue handle, its blade stuck in the wood. It's the one he used to carve the wagons with. I bend down, pull an old crate out, and in front of me, the unfinished wagon. Taking a tissue from my pocket, I wipe the dust off. It's painted red, green, and yellow. Tiny faded net curtains hang limply against the small windows. The front door has minute horseshoes attached to it. All the Romanis believe them to bring good luck. I would love to have this wagon. Before I leave, I look up to where the grapes used to grow in abundance. All that is left is a dried, tangled vine hanging loosely from the roof. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for your lovely comments. This next poem, I've just got two short ones now before I finish. What's the page number? 49. You will probably have heard of the police bill and, you know, Priti Patel and her dislike of all traveling people, basically. And this poem it's in honor of all those traveling gypsies, wherever they are, not just in this country, but who have been continually moved on and who are now facing imprisonment because they can't pull up their wagons. So it's called Chickens in a Pen. They drove us off the Toba, we settled in a ken. The Chavis didn't like it, like chickens in a pen. They drove us off the Toba, you've never seen the light. We couldn't hear the cuckoos sing or light the yog at night. They drove us off the Toba, the politicians had their say. We're gypsies through and through, watch us rise, we'll have our way. They drove us off the Toba, we've settled in a ken. The Chavis, they don't like it, like chickens in a pen. Thank you. Thank you so much. So my last poem is a little bit different from the rest of the poems, but when it was first suggested that I write about my gypsy family, I sort of closed my eyes and just had this image of a woman walking and walking and walking. And it sort of made me think of all the gypsies that left India, you know, in the 9th, 10th century, because they could no longer live there. And they made their way across different countries and they settled all over the world. And this is a poem, the Lungo Drom means the long road. And this is a poem called The Lungo Drom. Bare blistered feet, she walked over stone, on grass, through thicket and brush, in water, snow, flowers and mud. Her hair grew long, flowing like a river, tiny silvery fish latching on to each tendril, longing for the open sea. At night, she slept in bushes, caves, beside trees. She dreamt of fire. She drank from streams, picked heather, lavender, rosemary for healing, exchanged them for bread, kept on walking. Her hair turned white, her bones thinned, her body bent over, and her eyes grew weak. Still, she kept on moving. One early morning, under a mottled sky, she stopped. The moon shone in her body. Light fell on the ground, and she knew this was her Achintan. The Achintan is stopping place. Thank you so much. And I did really enjoy your reading, Heidi. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Everyone, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, what a reading we were in for today. And oh, Raine, we're so grateful to be able to hear, you know, it's your debut collection, but it's eons and eons of images. You know, born from, as you said, you know, the Romani language that, you know, poetry affords us this opportunity, this necessary opportunity to keep these languages alive and the memories alive and the images. And I dare say, I will never think of a hedgehog the same way again after today. That or the strawberry girl. And certainly thinking of all those caravans of wagons and a history of peoples, of traveling peoples, and what they endured and what you brought to life from your debut collection. Would you do me one favor? Would you show us the collection one more time?
Yes.
And I want to make sure that I have the Romani pronunciation correct. So would you remind us of the title, please?
Okay, so it's called The Talking Stick, O Puckering Kosh. And this here is my representation of the talking stick. But actually, I should have brought it in. It's in the other room, but the actual talking stick is here. It's made of the blackthorn, and it was used, there we go, it was used in an old Romanichal ritual where the one end of the stick would be placed in the hand of an elder who was dying or very ill, and the other end would be placed in the hand of a child or baby. And it was said that the wisdom and knowledge would be passed down through the stick to the youngest in the family. And it was usually done in a sort of a ceremony by a head rom, who would sort of follow through with that, and then there would be like drinks and food afterwards. So it was a ritual that I particularly wanted to explore, and I didn't actually read the poem in here, but another time I will, because I think not just the language, but some of these old rituals are very important to us, and I'm a lover of rituals. So. And as Jessie Lendenny said to me, she said, Raine, your book is like the talking stick. You can pass it around, and you're passing around knowledge and wisdom from your culture. So I thought that was a really, really sort of good analogy of it. Yeah.
Well, we're so appreciative. Ritual, imagery, rhythm, the beauty of language. Everyone, Raine Geoghegan, thank you so much.
Thank
what
you,
a
Sandy.
beautiful reading.
Thank
I
you.
do look forward to that next time. Indeed, indeed. Well, folks, as I said, we have this trio today that is just astounding. And now I get the pleasure of moving us on to Gary Copeland Lilley. I mean, do I ever have the best job? It's barely a job. To be able to host and get to hear poetry from poets that I truly marvel at, admire. And Gary's been also with us in Cultivating Voices live poetry since the early weeks, and always a pleasure to be able to have you read with us, Gary. And I know that you're just coming off a successful week at the Port Townsend Writers Conference and at Centrum. And I'm so glad that your newest collection, which is a re-up, it's a new edition. We're fortunate to be able to hear from today, from High Water Everywhere. And it's, a testament to Gary's work that a book will go into a new edition. This is kind of rare air for poetry. And I can't think of if you have not heard Gary's work, you will soon learn, why a poet's work goes into a new edition, because Gary's a unique voice in poetry. And those of us who've heard him read here, we've had the pleasure of understanding that. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about Gary Copeland Lilley. Gary Copeland Lilley is the author of 8 books of poetry, among them his newest collection, his newest edition, High Water Everywhere, from Willow Books. The Bushman's Medicine Show from Lost Horse Press in 2017, as well as a chapbook, The Hog Killing from Blue Horse Press 2018. He's a prolific poet. Gary earned his MFA from the Warren Wilson College Program for Creative Writers, is a veteran of the US Navy's Nuclear Submarine Force, and is originally from North Carolina and now lives and writes and performs, as well as teaches in the Pacific Northwest. He received the Washington, D.C. Commission on the Arts Fellowship for Poetry. He's a founding member of the Black Rooster Poetry Collective. He is published in vast anthologies and journals, and was a finalist for the 2018 and 2020 Washington State Poet Laureate. I have no doubt that you will be Poet Laureate someday of the state, and I dare say I wish you were the US Poet Laureate as well. Gary is a Cave Canem Fellow and the artistic curator of the Port Townsend Writers Conference. It is an honor, a pleasure, a joy, and a revelation to welcome Gary Copeland Lilley.
First thing I want to do is thank you, Sandy, for this venue, for this place that we can come and we can meet and we can hear and we could get into the music of our own words and stuff. Thank you so much for this, and thank you, Kim, for stepping in and doing all that you do, for hipping me to what was going on and inviting me for this. I really appreciate it. And I just want to let you know that you stepped into and that's recognized, really. That's recognized. So it is good to have a second edition of poems, but I'm just coming out of the Port Townsend Writers Conference, and I had to say, what did you say first? Heide and Raine, the work. I mean, thank you. I'm glad to be reading with y'all and stuff. This is just really, thank you much. I'm feeling okay. But I'm just coming out of the Writers Conference, right? And so, I love the job that I had this past year, and I got it for 2 more years of curating and bringing the faculty together. It was such a wonderful thing, and I had to say that I got lit up pretty good. I mean, I'm still a fire right now because of it and stuff. And so I've been writing new work, and I wrote one piece that I created at the Writers Conference itself, and so I would like to read that one and stuff. I do love High Water Everywhere. I don't know if you guys can see this one here, but yeah, that's it right there, High Water Everywhere. And that one, the second edition, is just I'm glad that they did this. But the new work, I hope it's received well, and so that's all I want to say. This poem, I'm going to try to read this one, and maybe this might be all the time I have. This poem is Wife Beater. He's a galaxy, he's a planet, he's a solar system. Everything revolves around him. It's his car, his money in the bank, his house is his fucking capital. He's the king, the dog, he's Big Dick Daddy, the long stroker. He knows her missing 2 smile beams upwards towards him. Her black eye seems to be winking at him. Her voice is zipped up in his pants, and her pussy belongs to him. 2. The old rule was the size of the stick which a man could use to beat his wife could be no bigger than the width of his thumb. Black men could not beat women because they didn't own them. They could not whip them any more than they could whip the master's horse. In the South, when the war was over, there were no slaves, and marital violence shifted from morality to a political issue. To feed their need for free labor, the law that limited the size of the stick in wife beating was used to imprison Black men, and they were held in jails to be leased to plantation owners and enslaved again. 3. There was a man that beat his wife because he could. Her father and her 2 older brothers were dead, and the youngest boy had been sent to safety in the city to live with relatives. So the man knew the wife had no one to protect her. Saturday night, she was getting ready to go out with her girlfriends, and he did not want her to go. And when she came to the room after her bath, he laid across the bed smirking as she went to the closet. She screamed. She found out he cut the ass out of all her party dresses. And he told her, if you want to step out and show your ass, go ahead. That meanness has always been there, long before he ever started letting his children see him put his greasy truck driving fist on her. 4. My father once made my mama strip and lay face down on the floor in the hallway, and he braided a whip of 5 hickory switches, and he beat her like a white man beats a slave. She had been a teenage bride, pretty as all get the hell out, but a baby boy was born 6 months later, a boy in whom he couldn't find any of his pecan brown resemblance, and further doubt firmly set in with the baby's indigo colored skin. 5. When I was a teenage revolutionary living on the other side of the state, and one of my brothers was also in the revolution, was incarcerated in Raleigh prison. And the youngest brother was working in a New Jersey tourist town, slinging food in an all-night diner. My sister, who in her senior year of high school, called the sheriff's office because she was afraid my father was going to kill my mother. He was beating her so bad. But the white man he drove long-haul truck for talked to the sheriff, and my father didn't spend one night in jail. So he returned to the house and sawed off the broomstick and beat my sister until she couldn't get up. Damn it, calling the law on him, which made my other 2 sisters forever afraid to get involved, and they married first husbands who beat them. 6. It seemed I grew up in some conflict with just about everything, especially those behaviors that were in opposition to the tenets my grandmother lived and showed me a bounty of love and family. No matter that a good many of us grandchildren became drinkers because all of her children had grown up abandoned and were ceaseless alcoholics, like my father, her son, who somehow was always a deacon, meaning God had given him dominion over my mother, and God gave him a dubious status as a leader in a small church where most of the old folks maintained a rigid focus on living quietly under the ongoing American apartheid. 7. The summer I was 5, when we lived in Queens, every time my father came home, I would begin to stutter, as I would for the next 20 years until I learned to breathe. Every man that knew my father knew he beat his wife. Us children were ashamed. My aunt and uncles, my grandmother, all loved my father, even though ashamed. He was a terrorizer in our house. He was the everlasting winter freeze. 8. If any society, a red state or a blue state, any county, any neighborhood or community on a dirt road, if that place is depending on physical force to uphold any law, and especially where there is no sexual equality, then I can fucking guarantee you are living in a country where white being a reflection of the societal violence that gets ignored. One night, my father threw bricks through the glass of every window in the house, starting with the master bedroom where my mother was fitfully sleeping after she locked the doors so she wouldn't get beaten. Nine. Been the boy that was afraid to fight. A hand-shy dog whimpered and crunched up, backing away with my tail tucked. So when at 20 years, I came home to visit my grandma after I'd done 30 days for drunk and disorderly. I was in her kitchen drinking her sassafras tea by the wood stove. My father showed up. Father showed up there and slapped me across my mouth because I had a difference of political opinion. And before he could pull his hand back to do it again, I had put my fist in the middle of his face and loosened some of his teeth. Oh, he said, so you're gonna fight me like a man, huh? And he came at me and drove both of us through Grandma's screen door and off of her porch into the yard where he landed on top and knocked the wind out of me. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out the pistol. He said, I did not know until now how much I wanted to kill you. And I knew that it was something that had been living within him, but my grandmother had come down into the yard screaming. Her sister, Ida, who lived in the field, across the field, my computer is dying. He said, I didn't know, not until now, how much I wanted to kill you. And I knew that it was something that had been living within him. But my grandmother had come down into the yard screaming. Her sister, Ida, who lived across the field, heard her and came running, and they begged the gun out of his hand. In the January ice that Wednesday when I rode the bus from Winston-Salem, 2 hours to Hereford, and then used the payphone outside the station to call Herman Hunter and Sandy Cross to come pick me up and drive me. I needed to see my family. And it being the middle of the week, I knew most likely my father would be on the road, maybe at a truck stop coming off some highway up in the mountains, probably in the sleeper cab of his Mac with some bar girl he met in a roadhouse, where he probably was playing Etta James. I'd rather go blind than see you walk away, because that's his theme song for any woman that happens along. 11. When I got to Sandy Cross and walked into a cold house where my mother lived under my father's roof, the unlit furnace made it seem even colder, and my mother said it was because my father didn't leave the money to keep the furnace on. And all she had was his $400 check that had come in the mail. Did I think I could go to James Edwards' store and cash it for 10 gallons of heating oil? It was so cold that James Edwards didn't even think about not cashing it. I drove home and poured the heating oil into the tank for the furnace, and went in and lit the pilot and gave the change from the cash check to my mother. Well, that was the day before my father came home early and found that I'd cashed his check, got pissed and asked for the change which I had given to my mother. She said she spent it all on groceries and bills. My father called the sheriff and said I had forged his $400 check. Then he took off to a liquor house in Joplin, fussing and cussing and fuming about my mother and me, but I knew it was gonna take the sheriff 30 minutes to get to the house, and that was all the time needed for my getaway. And my mother quickly helped me pack. 13. There is the unspoken legitimacy of intra-family violence in all cultures, according to authorities on such things. In fact, the family is the first is the setting in which most people first experience physical violence. The term wife beater is unthinkably used to describe a sleeveless ribbed undershirt, which has become the symbol which points to an unacceptable behavior of men who bash their wives. The battering of women by husbands, ex-husbands, and lovers is a major cause of injuries to women in the United States. 14. The day he made the mistake of attacking her in the kitchen because his dinner was late was his lesson learned. He slapped her away from the stove and down the counter, knocking the cooking pots of food to the floor as he beat her towards the drain tray, breaking the dishes and scattering the utensils, cornering her by the cabinet that was above the butcher block with an assortment of knives of different sizes. She grabbed the first one she could and slammed it up into the hilt into his chest, and that stopped everything. He dropped into a chair at the table, as pretty as you please, asked her to drive him the 30 miles to the county hospital. And seeing that knife was still vibrating as she said, he could fucking drive himself. And he later told his brother that every time he turned the wheel, it cut him a little deeper. Epilogue. The last days that I would ever be with my mother, I apologized. I said to her, I am sorry that when I was a kid, I could not protect you. And to myself, I knew full well why those beatings were happening, but was surprised at her apology to me of how it hurt her that she could not ever protect me from him. And I was standing there beside her bed, weeping into my indigo as she lifted her hand from the sheet and reached for me. Thank you.
Everyone, you've been listening to searing imagery and work. Gary Copeland, Lilley. Dare I say, this is why we come to Cultivating Voices, live poetry, to hear readings that we'll never forget. And today's offering from you, Gary.
Thank you, guys.
This new work is it's an astounding testament to your legacy as a poet. I mean, this is what, if folks of you buy High Water Everywhere, you will hear the same searing kind of imagery and rhythm and sound and story and fury born from the history that we've heard today from this new work, Wife Beater. I'm grateful for you sharing it with our audience. You could have shared it with, there's a million people that would have loved to have heard your work debuted. And I'm very, very grateful that our audience was graced with this work of yours. And always, whenever you bring your work to us, honestly. Thank you. I'm moved beyond words, really.
It's the venue that you have created that allows this to happen. You know, we have a community of poets from around the world that are keyed in here. You know, and like I'm I do adhere to something that Troy Derricott says when in Comic Con, that you must write the hard poem. You have to write the one you don't want to write.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes.
And you have to present it.
Yep. I know. I understand. I've attempted it, and I know you got to lean into the hardest things that you don't want to write, and that's where the poetry is going to come from. Yeah.
And that's
absolutely.
where it is.
That's where it is. That's where it is. And we saw it today from you sharing that new work with us. Again, I cannot express my gratitude enough for you bringing it to our audience today. And as I mentioned, everyone, please also, if you have not read High Water Everywhere, you've gotten a glimpse into the voice and the power of Gary Copeland Lilley's poetry here today. Congratulations on that second edition, and thank you very much. I'm trying to gather myself still for the reading. Oof. Everyone, if we've heard today on our new books showcase, as I mentioned, we put together a reading. I was thinking so much during the reading, Gary's reading, of the idea of the stick, the talking stick, and a different kind of stick that Gary spoke of. And then I was thinking of Joe DiMaggio's bat. Joe DiMaggio, Marilyn Monroe's husband, and his bat, and how that focused as a stick. So it gave me this, I just kept thinking of the stick throughout this work today, and the image of the stick. Well, we can never, ever truly know what the constellation of the three poets will bring us. And yet, I always feel confident that when we put together these readings, the juxtapositions release just astounding work and connections. And we have traveled through history and icons and the highs and the lows and the secrets, the lies, the violence. But what comes out is the language through these poems. Well, I'm thinking of those gypsy wagons of rains, traveling, releasing their sounds and their language. And now we have them through the poems. Folks, would you join me in unmuting for a moment and showing your appreciation to our readers today? Heide Seaborn, Raine.
Yeah.
Bravo.
And
Thank you. Awesome.
Thank you.
So grateful. Such amazing work.
Wonderful.
Never ever forget. Well, if you're like me, this is why you come to Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, to hear readings.
It's kind of why I'm here as well.
To hear the that you'll never forget, to experience poetry that will live in your memory and your mind and change your consciousness for years and years to come. And again, I can't thank the Heide Seaborn, Raine Geoghegan, and Gary Copeland, Lilley, and sharing their work today with us on our new books showcase featured here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. Well, these folks have featured their latest work, and next week we return with our wild card open mic where you, my friends, can be the features and share your newest work, or maybe some of your oldest work, with our live audience. So we'll be gathering again next Sunday on August 14th. For some of you, it's actually August 15th. There's someone in the room for whom it's August 15th, or it's August 8th already, but we'll be joining together again to hear the poetry that moves, astounds, makes us cry, makes us cringe, makes us feel. It makes us feel. It makes us feel. And that's why I come back every week, is to experience what only poetry provides, what only poetry provides to me. And I hope that that is the same for each of you. So I do hope you will join us again next week for our wild card open mic. Folks will have first 12 people that sign up to 5 minutes. Join us 15 minutes before the reading begins for the opportunity to sign up. The signups went like wildfire last open mic within the first 3 minutes. So I want to encourage you that if you hope to read in the open mic as one of our featured open micers, please join us. Come in early, sign up early, because they will go quickly. And we do try to get to the waiting list. Well, my friends, it's been a revelation of a Sunday afternoon here for me in Olympia, Washington. Again, I extend my utmost gratitude to our 3 featured readers today, Heide Seaborn, with Heidi's latest collection, Maryland Poems and Essays. Raine Geoghegan from The Talking Stick, Okukrinkosh, from Salmon Poetry. And finally, Gary Copeland, Lilley, 2nd edition, just arriving, of High Water Everywhere, which we've heard poems from before here on Cultivating Voices Live Poetry as well. Go back and look at the videos of our previous readings if you would like to hear some of the poems from High Water Everywhere. And of course, if you can, we hope that you will purchase 1, 2, or 3, all of the collections that you've heard today, resources allowed, of course. It's been quite an afternoon, and I'm going to sit with this work probably for the rest of the day, into the evening, and well into the week. I want to thank Don Krieger and Kim Ports-Parsons for your support of the reading series. We could never do it without the support of both of you. And of course, to all of you who joined us today here in our live audience for, as I said, a reading that I know that will remain with you for time immemorial. And that's what we seek to do here at Cultivating Voices Live Poetry. So bring your poetry of time immemorial next week, or come in hopefully for the opportunity to read with us. First 12 will be the features. I look forward to being with you next week, as I do most Sundays. So for now, I'm Sandy Yannone, signing off for Cultivating Voices Live Poetry, with so much gratitude for all of you joining us today live here on Zoom, as well as on Facebook. And as I say every week, folks, take good care of yourselves. Take very good care of your beloveds. And as we're examples of today's work, keep writing your astounding poetry. Be well all.